So welcome to episode 27 of 10 Minute Record Reviews. This time we're going to talk about Sweet's classic 1975 release, Desolation Boulevard, which I have the first US release of here. For me, they're a totally underappreciated band, particularly their work in the middle part of the 70s to the later 70s, when they freed themselves from the creative control and other kinds of control of their prior management team and their prior songwriting team to strike out and do their own thing. They have, musically speaking, an incredible lineup. Brian Connolly, a wonderful singer, along with Steve Priest, who provides excellent backup singing as well as lead vocals, a bass player. Then there's Andy Scott, who's a remarkable guitarist, and all underpinned by the drumming of Mick Tucker. Not a weak person musically in this entire lineup, very, very strong. This is a band which, at its best, was the equal of, to my mind, any hard rock outfit in mid-70s, and could achieve technical feats of virtuosity like the group high harmonies that we associate with Queen. Well, these guys could do it too. This album is their high point, and it's an essential part of any rock and roll collection, particularly if you like hard rock. Sweet's history was initially in the late 60s, early 70s, coming together as a so-called bubblegum band. They were part of the glam scene in the UK. They were singing songs written for them by Mike Chapman and Nicky Chinn, who were these impresarios who wrote the songs, managed the band, produced their albums and so on. And they had a string of hits, moderately successful, but basically lightweight. You know, songs like Wigwam Bam and a variety of other kind of top of the pops kind of classics. But the band wanted to be harder edged. They wanted to write their own music, and perform their own music. And on this album, they kind of did that. And that half of the songs here are their own. The Chapman-Chin management team is still quite influential, and the songs on the first side are all Chapman and Chin songs. And there are a lot of great songs in this record from both the Chapman and Chin collaboration, but also from the band themselves. This record, as I mentioned, is the US release in 1975. It's a bit of a mishmash of an album which came out in the UK in 1974 called Sweet Fanny Adams, which of course links to the title of one of the tracks in here, Sweet F.A., and then a subsequent UK release called Desolation Boulevard. Neither of those albums have the same track lineup as this record, and I would argue that this record is significantly superior to the track listings on both of those UK albums. So if you're going to pick anything up by Sweet, this US release is the one to pick up. It also has a great cover, so which is a bit of a, they didn't have Photoshop then, but it's a pastiche because they've taken a photo of the band and overlaid it over this shot of the Sunset Strip. For people of my age, this is a bit of an iconic album cover. And actually, I went to, when I was in LA with my partner a couple of years ago, so I found the place where this photo was taken and I recreated it. And a friend of mine, Andy O'Neill, created a mashup with the band pictures and then my photo of the Sunset Strip from 2018, which you can see here. So these guys went on to do a bunch of other pretty good hard rock after this album, but this is pretty much acknowledged to be their high watermark. And in particular for Brian Connolly, the lead singer, not long after this album came out, he was in a pub in London, and I apparently took a liking to someone else's girlfriend. That member of the public didn't care for that. And Connolly comes out of the pub. There's a bunch of guys waiting for him. Fight ensues, and what happens during this fight is that Connolly gets kicked right in the throat. His voice is never the same again, and sadly that leads in part to a long spiral of sort of professional failure, depression, drug abuse, and eventually an untimely death in the 1990s. It's a very sad story, but here he's absolutely at his peak, and it's really quite something to hear. So side one starts with the best known song on the album, which is Ballroom Blitz, which you've no doubt heard at the wedding reception in your time. And fine, it's probably the most overplayed song on the album, but it's an excellent song. There are some effects, there is a bit of studio polish, but for the most part, the instruments and the musicians are left to shine and to really good effect here. It's this song in particular is driven by some phenomenal drumming by Mick Tucker. Then we're on to the 16s, which is this wonderful, dramatic, sort of narrative song about about these various young couples and their trajectories. It's really kind of epic scope. It's maybe the most Queen-like of all the songs on this album. It has at times a bit of an operatic feel to it, not necessarily the singing, but more kind of the scope what they're trying to accomplish with the song and the composition and so on. It's so good. Then No You Don't, which is a much more sort of straightforward rocker. A wonderful performance by Brian Connolly on vocals here. The high harmonies here are stupendous. The only issue, and there's very little to pick at on this album in terms of quality of what's on offer here. The only issue here is chorus is a little bit repetitive on the outro. One of the biggest sins in the whole album, and it's not that big of a deal. Followed by AC/DC, you know, one of the great songs about bisexuality. It's just a great piece of boogie rock, and it's got stellar drumming again from Mick Tucker, and some wonderful soloing by Andy Scott. And then the side closes out with I Want to Be Committed, which is, you know, a kind of a mid-70s take on mental illness, which probably wouldn't be a take today. It's a pretty dark tune. It's got more great drumming, more great guitar. It's got some either whacked out or awesome lyrics depending on your point of view. You know, I thought I was a space-age cowboy. Thought I was a sweet and sour chowboy. You know, what's not to like? Side 2 begins with Sweet F.A., which is and has this wonderful tense riff that starts the song with very powerful drumming underneath. Then into some really funky riffing and back into the tense part. There are a few rock songs that I know that create that level of sort of tension and anticipation just from the outset of the song. The lyrics of Sweet F.A. are, well, I think if we're being generous, they're a little 70s, and so there's you know, they're a little bit grim. That was a decade it was, I guess. There's a nice synthy bridge in there, and which happens I think 2 or 3 times, which I really kind of like. And then you got to, you know, then you're the final verse and chorus, and then at the end of this song, the last 90 seconds is just a complete hard rocking guitar meltdown. It is. If you listen to that, listen to the last 90 seconds of Sweet F.A. and tell me who was a better guitarist than Andy Scott at this point in the 1970s, because there would not be too many candidates. Really, really quite amazing. Fox on the Run, their second next to Ballroom Blitz, the second big pop hit that was on this album, monster hit. You can sing along with your mom on this because she knows, you know, kids, because she knows all the lyrics. So does Dad. And the lyrics, by the way, are awesome. It's all about slagging off musical posers and wannabes and so on, and really, really enjoyable. And then we're on to Set Me Free. So Set Me Free is one of the great quandaries of 1970s rock. I do not know how this song was not one of the best-known, best-selling hard rock songs of the decade. Instead, it's buried as an album cut, and it is, I think, on an album full of really strong songs, the best song on the album. It has amazing singing by Brian Connolly. You know, again, with the Queen-like high harmonies. The guitar from Andy Scott is remarkable. It's kind of sort of this proto speed metal almost. I don't know how it wasn't a monster hit. And it also, incidentally, has, I think, the best use of a phaser in rock and roll history. And just when you think it can't get any better, the outro guitar soloing, it just is mind-melting. So, a wonderful song. Then the latter 2 songs, which round out the album, are in what I would call the pretty good category. Into the Night, again, more great riffing, more great singing, more great harmonies, more great drumming, a beautiful bridge in that song. It has a kind of a whole lot of love sort of freak out section 2/3 of the way in. But you know, having given it that temptation, they recover quite nicely, I think, out of that. Lyrics are a bit dumb, but you know, there you go. And then finally, Solid Gold Brass, which is a nice sort of light and shade kind of a piece. It's got a really sort of shimmering verse where they do actually use quite a lot of effects. But I think well, great descending riff in the pre-chorus, and you know, and then you know, preparing really to sort of rock out through the rest of the song. It's got also a very jazzy little bridge, which reminds me of of when, you know, BTO, Randy Bachman used to have these little sort of jazz, sort of intrusive thoughts also to a degree in the Guess Who, but more so in BTO. Sounds a bit like when Randy would get jazzy in BTO. So the verdict, there's not a weak tune here at all, and there are some incredible highlights. As good, the highlights of this album are as good as any rock and roll album that you want to suggest from the whole decade. The songs are incredibly well written. The playing is great. So as I said at the outset, this is in the top 10 hard rock albums of the 70s. It should be as well known as Machine Head or Boss's Debut. It's not. I don't know why, and I'm here to give it 5 stars.